Imagine a screen in front of you, and you are one of those air traffic controllers, and there are planes filling the screen, just flying around, and the room is chaos because some of these planes are not landing, and they're burning fuel, and they're not landing, and they're filling up the screen, and people are getting nervous. Now imagine that some of those planes are grievances, that people have these grievances that need to land, but instead they're burning up fuel, they're taking up space, they can interfere with a potential emergency, they're using energy that can be used creatively. Instead, they're just flying around. How many people have a grievance that is flying around in their minds, in their hearts, and it's not landing? And it's using up fuel, it's using up energy that could be used elsewhere, and it's time to land the plane. It's time to get that plane out of the air so that we can utilize that energy in a positive way and be able to move forward with one's life. Who here, you don't have to raise your hand, who here who's listening has a grievance that you might be carrying around? How do we know? Well, whenever you think of a personal hurt from the past, anybody can remember a personal hurt from the past? It's amazing what I've heard other ministers talk about how when they would prepare a talk or set a title for a talk, stuff would happen that would challenge them in that talk. And it's interesting how I noticed this week some things came to my mind as I was thinking about this topic. It's like, wow, I haven't thought of that in a long time. So is there a personal situation from the past, a personal wound or hurt, that when you think about it, you experience anger, you experience hurt, you experience tension in your body? That's one sign. Is there a story that we keep telling ourselves? Are there thoughts, repetitive thoughts that keep going around, the same repetitive thoughts around this thing that happened that we often think about? Is there, do we think more about this thing that happened to us, this hurt, this wound, than we do the good that's in our life? See, these are some questions. If the answer to some of these questions is a yes, we're probably carrying around a grievance. Well, so what? So what, Justin? You know, that's one of the delicious things in life, to carry around a grievance, some people think. Here's the problem. When you think back of something that happened to you that was done wrong, and it brings up anger and fear and other stuff, what's happening is it's activating the fight or flight within our bodies, within our nervous systems. It's sending chemicals into our body. It causes the blood pressure to rise. It's unhealthy. It's stressful. Now, a grievance is something that you constantly going over in your mind. So that's every time you remember it, you think about it, you tell the story in your head or to someone else, it's causing these stress in your system. It's unhealthy. Plus, it activates that part of your brain, because when your fight or flight kicks into gear, it takes energy away from your brain. And some of us need all the energy in our brain we can get. It takes energy away from the brain because it's preparing the body to run or to fight. And so you don't think as clearly. You don't think as clearly. So that's why it's important that we heal the grievance. Not only that, but it also affects our current relationships. Because if we're focused on something that happened in the past, we're probably carrying around this anger is spilling out in our relationships in our life right now. And if we're preoccupied with a grievance, we're probably not thinking about our loved ones as much as we could. Make sense? So it affects our current life, and we're probably not doing as well in our job or in our work if we're working, because we're using that brain power and energy, and we're not thinking as well. So it's important that we learn and to forgive. Perhaps this is why the way-shower and teacher Jesus the Christ, when one of his disciples said, "Jesus, how many times should I forgive? 7 times?" And Jesus said, 70 times 7. 70 times 7. Now he wasn't giving an exact number. You keep your little list. Well, that's 10 times. I'm getting closer. No. It's just a symbol, a metaphor for you got to forgive until you let it go. You got to forgive as many times as you need to forgive. Now, here's the question. People are hesitant to forgive because they think, just like Mike, okay? Let's use Michael, for instance. Michael worked for an internet startup company, and everybody was working long hours to make it happen. That's just what they did in those businesses. And he didn't mind working 72 hours a week because he was doing what he liked, web design. And he liked web design. But what happened is other managers hired other web designers, and next thing you know, they needed a technical writer, and they made him a technical writer. Now he's resentful and bitter because he's doing something he doesn't like now. His work is a drag. Now he's spending 70 hours a week doing something he doesn't like. And he's resentful. He feels like his boss has lied to him. See, that's what happens. How is a grievance formed? One way it's formed is something happens to us that we didn't want. Mike didn't want to be a technical writer. He wanted to be a web designer. The other thing that happens is something that happened to Dana. The other reason a grievance formed is because we want something and it doesn't happen. Dana worked in a field. She was an account advisor, and she worked for 10 years in this company, and she put in a lot of overtime. And when someone resigned, they said to her, they hired someone else to fill that position. And they said, look, we formed a policy that we were going to hire outside executives. So she didn't get the promotion she had hoped to get. Well, there you go. She wanted something and didn't get it. Now she was bitter and resentful. She was angry at the company, and she started to look back at the 10 years, started resented it, time away from her 2 kids to try to work for this company, and they overlooked her for the promotion. Now she's angry and bitter and resentful. Right? I mean, these are things that are unfortunate, and we're certainly not saying that we don't acknowledge the hurt and the pain or the wrongdoing. So please note that forgiveness is not saying that the behavior is okay. It's not saying that something is okay. Oh, it's okay the boss lied to me. No, that's not forgiveness. No, it's okay to acknowledge the boss lied to me. I don't trust the boss right now. And I don't know if I'll ever trust him or respect him again. But the problem is not the boss. The problem is, what am I carrying around now? It's causing stress. I'm not thinking as clearly, and it's affecting my loved ones, and it's affecting my health. You see that? So forgiveness is not about condoning bad behavior or wrong behavior. That's number one. And that's not forgiveness. Forgiveness is not doing it. Forgiveness doesn't say that a drunk driver who hits somebody with a car and they're badly injured, that person is not punished in some way. That's not forgiveness. Forgiveness is not saying that there's not going to be some kind of compensation from that driver to the injured person. Forgiveness doesn't say that. Forgiveness is about the person. It's about you. It's not about the other person. It's about you. Freeing yourself from the stress, from holding oneself back. How many of you are excited about letting go of any grievance or resentment or bitterness that you might be carrying around to free yourself up? I don't expect a lot of hands to go up because, nobody wants to say I'm carrying one of those around. It's okay, we're human beings. We're spiritual beings having a human experience, aren't we? We're spiritual beings having a human experience, which means we all have stuff that we're dealing with. Unless, if you're levitating above the rest of us, I invite you to thank you for joining us. Thanks for being part of our spiritual community. But the rest of us, we got stuff to deal with. So forgiveness is freeing ourselves from the burden of grievances. Now, when we understand Fred Luskin, Dr. Fred Luskin, the founder of the Stanford Forgiveness Project, he's written a wonderful book that I've read and taught in the past years as well, and there's a lot of great testimonials about how wonderful this book is, the best book people ever read on forgiveness. I found it very helpful in my own life too. And that's what we're going to do in this 3-part series, talk about different aspects of it. Today we're going to look at how a grievance is formed. Because when you can see how it's formed, then you can recognize it in yourself, and that in itself might free you. Then we're going to talk about how to get free from that. So far we said a grievance happens when something happens that you didn't want, or you wanted something and it didn't happen. Perhaps this is why the yogi sages and saints and sages talk about not having likes and dislikes, but learning to wake up to your inner joy, your inner love, if we were totally unblocked, we would be totally in love and joy all the time. Now, who's excited about that, right? Yeah, you raise your hand for that, right? Me too. Yeah, so if we were in that state all the time, it wouldn't matter so much, It'd be like, okay, well, that's fine. I don't mind technical writing. I'm happy in myself. I don't care what job I do. Lord, thank you for the technical writing job. I'm happy to have a job. Thank you, Lord, Or, okay, I didn't get the promotion. I guess God has some other thing in store for me. Thank you, God. Thanks for the love and the joy that I constantly feel, right? I just want to interject that in there too. But because you and I are growing and we're still on this path, we haven't quite made that complete God realization yet. We're almost there, aren't we? We haven't made that quite yet. We got to work with where we are. That's why we're doing this, right? That's why we're doing this series. So what Luskin says, there are 3 things that cause the grievance to be formed. And the first one is taking things way too personally. Taking things way too personally. Take Marilyn, for instance. Marilyn is 51 years of age, and she is still angry that her mom was cold when she was a child. That she did not receive the love and warmth and caring that she wanted and needed as a child. Now, again, forgiveness is not saying, oh, that doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. It does matter. Children need love and caring and comfort as a child. We're not saying her mom was right. Okay? But Marilyn, here's where it's personal. It's personal because it happened to Maryland. Right? That's personal. The problem is it starts to form a grievance because Marilyn is now, that's all she's thinking about. Everything's about my mom didn't love me as a child, and this is why I'm having problems in my relationships. And here she is at 51 years of age, still talking to people and herself about her mom not giving her the love that she needed. I know what that's like. My mom had a similar situation. My mom's mother didn't like her. She liked her older sister. She didn't like my mother. And my mother spent a lot of her life looking for love and approval, maybe because of that early experience. I don't know. And so, you know, Marilyn made, it's just happened to me. I'm so unfortunate. It's terrible. And I'm, you know, things are unjust and all that because my mother didn't give me the love that I needed. Now, that's a hard situation, right? That's personal. It happened to Marilyn. That's how it becomes a grievance, because what you focus on and take too personally, it becomes a habit. And that hurt becomes a habit. Now you start responding. Your fight or flight system kicks in every time you think about it. Every time Marilyn would think about her mother who didn't love her and why things aren't right in her life, the fight or flight would kick in. And she'd have those emotions all over again, because your nervous system can't tell the difference between imagined and a real experience. It's gonna experience the same thing again, even though it happened 40 years ago. And you're going to tend to think that, see, they caused this, you know. Now, here's how Marilyn could take it less personally. Think about what happened in your life. Does everybody have something in your life that, you know, you were hurt or angry about? We all have something. And here's how you look for the impersonal in that situation. You recognize, and Marilyn could have done this, that there are a lot of children in the world who don't have a loving, warm mother when they're a child, or parent, other parent. There are a lot of kids in the world who had cold mothers or fathers, right? It's not just Marilyn, it's a lot of people. So Marilyn could expand and go, you know, it was tough on me, but I know there's a lot of other people that this is happening to also. It's not all about me. It's something that happens. The late Eric Butterworth used to talk about the fish hook. You know, a fish hook, right? He said, here's the problem. They're doing it to me. Now the finger points back at me. It's a hook. Now I'm hooked in. They're doing it to me. That's the second part of taking it too personally. We think they're trying to hurt us on purpose. And sometimes that's the case, but most of the time, that's not the case. You know, so they're doing it to me instead of they're just doing it. They're not doing it. They're not trying to hurt me. They're just doing it. So if Marilyn could look at her mother and realize, my mom was in an unhappy marriage. She was in an unhappy marriage. My father traveled a lot. She had severe arthritis, the mother. So she was in a lot of pain. And also, the mother was jealous of the love the father had for the daughter. So the mom had all that stuff going on in herself. Now, if she's got all that going on, again, we're not justifying her behavior. We're not saying, oh, well, it's okay. No, we're not saying that. But we're understanding that she wasn't trying to be cold to Marilyn on purpose. She wasn't doing it to Marilyn. She was just doing it. And the interesting thing about it is, because Marilyn is so caught up in this situation, she's neglecting her own children and husband and doesn't realize it. Because she's so stuck in her grievance, she's doing the same thing her mother did. How many of you have known somebody who did that? They're complaining about somebody else and their behavior, and in your mind you're going, well, that's how you are, huh? You ever done that, right? I'm like, well, it's funny you're complaining about that because that's how you are to me. You know, and that's what was happening to Marilyn. So she was taking it too personally. Now, what is your situation? How can you look for the impersonal in your situation? Can you acknowledge that, hey, this is not just unique to me. This happens to other people as well, one, or it's happened to other people as well. Not saying it's good, not saying it's okay, we're not saying that. But it does happen to other people because we are human beings on this planet Earth and we're still all growing. And then secondly, recognize in most cases, they weren't doing it to hurt you personally. They just did it and you caught the brunt of it. So grievances form, first of all, taking things too personally, and it becomes a habit. It starts to take up space in your consciousness. As Luskin says, you're renting too much space in the house of your consciousness. And for New Yorkers and New Jersey folks, you're renting too much space in your apartment to your grievance. It's taking up too much space. Imagine that you have a house or an apartment and you own it and you're letting this grievance have the master bedroom. You built a whirlpool for this grievance. You let it put its stuff in all the rooms in your house. It's just having a grand old time, and it's got a special rent, monthly rent, just for the grievance. It's got your whole house taken over. Instead of going, wait a minute, move your stuff out of the rooms. I'm taking the master bedroom. It's my house. I'm going to enjoy the whirlpool. You can, in fact, I might have to give you an eviction notice maybe, right? Instead of letting it have one room, it's got the whole house taken over. Time to change that situation. So taking things too personally. The second thing that leads to a grievance is playing the blame game. Playing the blame game. Turn to your neighbor and say, don't play the blame game. Turn to your computer and your phone at home and say, don't play the blame game. How do you play the blame game? Alex knows how to play the blame game. Alex's wife cheated on him, had an affair. That happens. Cheated on him, have an affair, and now Alex, months later, is telling everybody, that wicked woman, lying, cheating, wicked woman, had an affair on me. In the beginning, he was going to a support group with other men whose wives had cheated on their sorry butts. And they were all, I'm just kidding about that, that stuff happens. So they were all talking about how bad it is and all that. Well, eventually those guys moved on. They're like tired of hearing their grievance story, tired of hearing everybody else's grievance story. Gone on to meet other people and continue their day. Not Alex. Alex has chased those people away. They're like, we don't want to hear your story anymore. He got support in the beginning, but he's still telling the story. Talking about how she ruined my life. And, I can't relate to women now because I don't trust them. They're all cheating, lying people and, all kinds of stuff. His focus, his grievance is affecting his work life. His friends don't want to hear his story anymore, so they're getting away from him. And it's all because of her lying, cheating self. She's the reason for why he's so miserable. Some of y'all going, yeah, that's right. No, this is 6 months later or 2 months later, whatever it is. Why is something 2 months later and some people are carrying around 30 years like Marilyn? Why is that affecting their life now? Now. It's all happening in here, isn't it? It's not happening anymore. She moved on. It's like the comedian Buddy Hackett said, while you're angry and resentful, they're out dancing. She's with her new boyfriend. She's having a grand old time. Alex is still whining to everybody in sight. Trying to make a heavy subject lighter, right? but it's true. Blame is when we're saying it's because of him and what he did that I feel angry and hurt. Not true. Not true. It's because we are telling the same story that brings up those feelings over and over again, and it's become a habit. And we are failing to see the good in the present moment because we're so caught up in what happened 2 months ago or 6 months ago or 6 years ago that we're not seeing the rest of our life. We're stuck. We're stuck, and it's unhealthy. Unhealthy, and it cheats the people in our life now. I mean, take Dana, right? She was working 10 years, and they didn't promote her. They took in outside people. Now, she could have said, all right, I understand that's a policy of the organization. I know that happens in other organizations. I get that. I see that. And, you know, I've had a great 10 years here. It's been fulfilling. It's been satisfying. And I understand why they did that. I don't appreciate it. I'm hurt by it. I'm angry by it. But, all right, it's one of those, let me move on. And, hey, I have 2 daughters I love. I have parents who love me. I've got friends. I am blessed. You know, I'm healthy. I'm blessed. She could have done that. She didn't do that. Instead, she got angry at the bosses. How dare them? She started to look at her 10 years and started to talk about, well, there's other things at work that weren't fair and weren't right. And she started to get into that and live that out. And now she's in a full-blown grievance. It was her choice, you see. What happened to her was not her choice, but how she's reacting is her choice. As Elsie Robinson said, it's not what happens around you or to you that matters most, but what happens in you. In you. It is a choice. And if we blame, then we're stuck because now we're a victim. How many people are excited about being a victim? Nobody, right? We don't want to be a victim because now Dana's a victim of the bosses. Now Alex is a victim and is being held hostage by his ex-wife. Who here wants to be held hostage by somebody? Who here wants somebody who doesn't care about you having power over you? Because that's what we do when we blame. We give power over somebody to somebody who doesn't care about us. They hurt us, they wounded us, they don't care about us. And so a grievance starts to form through blame. Through blame, we become a victim. And here's the deal. If we're busy blaming, we're not recognizing our responsibility in the situation either. Like Alex. Alex, that woman cheated on me. Well, guess what? Alex, you're so busy blaming her for your life and how you feel and for your lack of ability to get in relationships that you don't recognize that several times she tried to talk to you about your unsatisfying sex life and how you lacked enthusiasm in that area. And you didn't do anything about that. And there were other things too that she tried to talk to you about, and you weren't listening. You weren't listening. You weren't changing your behavior, right? So, he didn't remember that though. Alex didn't remember that. He's too busy blaming. See, because that's what happens. When we get in this grievance, our brain doesn't think as well. We don't make as good of decisions. And that's a great reason to forgive, is so that you can move forward with your life and start making good decisions that aren't based on hurt and anger, right? Start living our life now. So who's excited about taking back your power? Who's excited about letting go of the blame so you don't let somebody who doesn't care about you exercise control over you anymore? Who wants to be free? Who wants to be free now to move forward with your life and start to enjoy and appreciate more of the good that's in your life right now? All of us do, right? We all do. So that's how a grievance starts to get formed. We take something very too personally. We don't see the impersonal aspects of it. And secondly, we play the blame game. She's the reason. He's the reason I'm so miserable. He's the reason I'm in pain. He's the reason that I can't get along anymore. He's the reason I'm not succeeding at work. You're stuck, man. You're a victim. You're a victim. Accept responsibility. You're responsible for how you feel now. Yes, it's too bad it happened. It's not right what she did, okay? She broke your marriage vows several times. She broke the marriage vows. She cheated. She lied. She deceived. Yeah, she did all that. You had a little bit part in it too, right? You weren't listening. You weren't listening. And, but it doesn't make her behavior right. But you're holding yourself back, Alex. It's time to move on. It's time to take control of your thoughts and feelings now. Start living life now. So, third cause of a grievance is a grievance story. It's a story we're telling ourselves and telling everybody else who will listen, right? It's just, we all have stories. How many of y'all love stories? I love stories. You like movies? I like movies. Yeah, we like stories. The problem is when our story is about that idiot who did such and such to us, and we're reliving and retelling that story over, and we're a poor little victim, right? And that's the story we tell ourselves and we tell other people. And it brings up all those emotions and all that, those chemicals and stress, and it clouds our minds. We create a grievance story. See, anger and hurt is natural. Yeah, something happens. Something happens we didn't want to happen. Something doesn't happen we wanted to happen, and we feel angry or hurt, bitter, whatever. Okay, those emotions are meant to be felt and then pass through, right? We're meant to let ourselves feel it and let it pass through. But instead, what happens is we blame, we take it too personally, and now we got the story we want to tell about it. And it keeps playing in our heads. Remember we said, is there a repetitive thought pattern going on? Are the emotions of hurt and anger still there? Is there this story where we're a victim that shows up? That's a grievance story. And that keeps us stuck. We don't recognize it, but that imprisons us. That story makes a difference. That story, every time we tell that story, we're keeping ourselves imprisoned. And it's possible to edit that story. It's possible to retell that story so that you are no longer a victim, you are a hero. Who wants to be a hero? You can retell that story in your mind so that you're not like Alex, where everything that's wrong in your life is because of her, but rather you have learned from the experience, you have grown from the experience, you're healing from the experience, you're a survivor from the experience. I did have that good example from my dad. He was pretty good survivor from stuff. You know, when he came home and his wife had cleaned out all the furniture in the apartment, he, surprise, you don't have a bed to sleep in. He's no longer on the planet, so I can laugh about that now. But, but he went back to the gym and he was getting back in shape, and he told me, Justin, your daddy's a survivor, which is a good example, right? Good example. That's the other reason to forgive and to move on, is because you become a role model for other people around you. You become a model, even if no one knows it, vibrationally, energetically, you become a role model. Because people go, wow, she went through that experience and she has moved through that and let that go and has gone on to take care of herself and to create other relationships and to grow from that experience. Now you become a hero in your story. You become a hero in your story. So those are 3 factors that create a grievance. Taking it way too personally. It's all about me. No, it happens a lot. Whatever your situation, you probably think of 10 people it's happened to. 10 other people it's happened to. And the interesting thing is, these 3 factors apply to the most horrendous situations in life. Somebody's child is murdered, or terrible things. The same 3 factors, as well as not getting something as superficial as not getting a parking space. You wanted something, you didn't get it, you feel like they did it to you, and you start to blame, and you start to create this story of, how selfish people are, blah, blah, blah. It's the same 3 things that apply to everything. So, what about your interpersonal wound? How are you doing with that? Have you been taking it too personally? Maybe expand and start to see the impersonal in it. Maybe that'll make it lighter for you. Maybe that'll help you to break that grievance cycle or prevent something from moving into a grievance, see? Secondly, are we blaming? Are we blaming that person for how we feel? Are we blaming them for the way our life is? You don't have to do that. Take back your power. Take back your power and recognize you're responsible for how you feel right now. That you can move forward with your life. Don't hold yourself. Don't make yourself a victim of somebody who doesn't even care about you anymore. And care for yourself. With God, all things are possible. You can move forward now with your life. And third, notice the story that you keep telling yourself. Notice when that story comes up. And recognize that you can edit that story, not falsely. If you're moving forward with your life and you're taking care of yourself and you're learning and growing, you can make yourself a hero instead of a victim in that story. So next week, we're going to talk about rules, rules, rules. Anybody have any rules about how people should behave? Anybody have any rules about how your husband should be, or your wife, or your spouse, or your partner? Anybody have any rules about how other people should behave in the world? Well, guess what? That is a contributor toward creating a grievance. Next week, we're going to talk about rules, 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 and what we can do about those rules, rules, rules. And we might even get into how we can make ourselves a hero in our grievance story next Sunday. And then the third part, we'll talk about some techniques in forgiveness. So anyway, not making light of anything that you are going through right now, have been through. I'm not making light of that at all. It is very important, and that's why we're having this conversation. So you can be free. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Let's get still. Thank you. Thank you, Father, Mother God, for your presence and activity in our lives. We are so grateful for your teachings, your truth. And we recognize that as your children, we are meant to be free. We are meant to be filled with love and joy and peace and contentment, and to enjoy the fullness of life, to live life as a great adventure, to wake up every morning with excitement, enthusiasm, and to go to bed every night looking forward to the next day. We recognize that this is how you would have us live life. I've come that you may have life and have it abundantly. I've come that my joy might be in you and your joy might be full. And we recognize, because we're growing, Father, Mother God, that we have stuff that holds us back. We recognize that we slip, but we know that a slip's not a fall. And so we get back up. And we thank you for the tools and the techniques and the ideas to help support us in how we can move forward in our growth and in our enlightenment. Thank you, Father, Mother God, for your love, for your peace, for your caring that is always present for us and within us. And so it is. Amen.